Okay. Sorry for last time, okay? If you were here for the last stream, there was an emergency, okay? I had to take care of my dogs. I didn't actually mean to stop the stream. Fuck. Okay, wait, I'm about to leak some DMs. True. So true. Alright. I just have to keep back. Yeah, okay. Sorry, there was an emergency with my dogs. I had to take care of it. Professional streamer? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Oh, what's your dog's names? You think I would dox my dogs? Alright. We're going to get back to the topics we were talking about in just a minute. Just going to wait for some more people to shuffle in. Be back. What kind of emergency requires you to turn off streaming? I didn't mean to turn off streaming. Fuck. I don't know how to. I thought, like, I thought if I press stop streaming, like, the stream would still be up on YouTube, like, but my stuff just wouldn't be streaming to it. But it turns out that it actually, like, ends the stream on YouTube. I meant to just, like, pause the stream. So. Fuck, if anyone knows how to do that, let me know. I'm gonna plug my stream real quick. Since that last stream fucked up, I'm gonna, like, do a quick speed run of what I just covered, like, really quickly. And then we are going to move on to the other topics, okay? just gotta plug this on YouTube or on Twitter. Bruh. Oh, it's Zoomer Nation. Hey. Gotta wait for that $4,000 Simex check? Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. Oh, I don't know. I have my headphones and I'm not listening to anything. True. Um. Okay. Okay, are we ready? God fucking damn it. The dogs, like, in the neighborhood are barking and it's making my dogs freak the fuck out. It's very, very annoying. Okay. I think everything is calm now. Okay. All right. Why Biden given us 14 on. It's funny because, like, you make that joke, but that's unironically what people were doing for the minimum wage. Like, people were unironically just like, why not? It's 15 in 5 years. Why not 35 right now? It's like, oh, okay. It's partially what drove me and Aiden, to do our podcast episode on the minimum wage. It's funny because, like, the kinds of people who make that argument, like, why can't we just raise it to 35? They're showing that, like, they don't even know how to justify the minimum wage in the first place. Because, like, ironically, the argument about that explains why the minimum wage, when raised to like 15 or to any extent, doesn't lead to unemployment, is fundamentally regarding monopoly. But understanding the mechanism of monopsony also necessitates that you have to understand that there is a limit where, like, wages can be artificially risen so far above like marginal productivity that it will cause some degree of unemployment, substantial unemployment. What if you raise it to 15 and strengthen unions? Yeah, that would be ideal, right? The tier list in terms of wage policy would be $15 minimum wage is like good, but it's not the best. It's like it's good tier, okay? Is some sort of a minimum wage that's like regionally indexed to like regional costs of living. That would be better. And then the best thing would just be having like massive sectoral unions where workers set wages without the need for a federally mandated minimum wage. I read the Dutch comments on your debate with Yernaz on his channel, and holy shit, the only thing they do is say he doesn't understand the real world, makes you so sad. Yeah, that's just like a classic ad hominem fallacy. And speaking of ad hominem, like, I don't like how the word ad hominem fallacy has been like changed, because like the way people use ad hominem fallacy is they just say like an ad hominem is when anybody insults you at any point in an argument, which is not really what the ad hominem fallacy is. In fact, insulting someone isn't really a fallacy. Like, you can be a total dick and still have a completely valid point. The ad hominem fallacy is specifically when you disregard the validity of someone's argument by attacking some personal characteristic about them. So ironically, if you were to make a bunch of valid points and then said, also, you're a little cuck boy, and then I were to say, well, you insulted me, so your whole point's invalid, ironically, I would be the one engaging in an ad hominem fallacy, not the other person. But yeah, when people are just like, you've never paid taxes, so you don't know, you can't, like, your argument for different economic policies is invalid, that is like a good example of a classic ad hominem. Pretty much everywhere except big cities when they already have higher minimum wages. The fallacy. We have evidence that rural areas could handle a minimum wage at around 80% of the median wage. Ooh, you should send me that. That actually sounds really compelling. I could use that. Because all I'm familiar with is the Doob paper that says, like, nationally 60% of 60% of the median wage doesn't seem to have any large disemployment effect. However, that doesn't necessarily take into account specifically like rural areas where the $15 minimum wage might be well above that. And but so what I've classically said is like, well, that's true, but like at the same time, these places are the same places that have more monopsony, so we'd expect their threshold of the minimum wage compared to median wage to be like higher in terms of not seeing any negative employment effects. But I haven't seen data on it. Yeah, you should DM me that, meme guider. Demon Mama saying RGR was trying to justify her existence. Is that an ad hom? Yes, that is a perfect example of an ad hominem fallacy, and a transphobic one at that. It's psychologizing, yeah. Okay. I'm going to re-go over what I was talking about really quickly with the Biden stuff. So there's been a lot of discourse recently about Biden's immigration policy, sparked by a Washington Post article. There's been a lot of discourse about how it compares to Trump's immigration policy with regards to his family separations and putting kids in cages. This discourse, at least the first I saw of it, was this tweet from the Serfs, where they said how it started. Donald Trump's inhumane, fear-based immigration policies are a stain on our nation. We have to get him out of the White House and ensure our laws reflect our values as a nation of immigrants. And then, of course, how it's going. First migrant facility for children opens up under Biden. Obviously, the implication here is that what Biden is doing with regards to this new migrant facility is more or less the same as what Trump was doing. Hassan also did a video, posted, I saw Meme Guider posted a screenshot, what happened to no kids in cages, again, implying that Biden's policy with regards to children at the border is more or less the same, and that, all the libs who criticized Trump for putting kids in cages at the border and doing family separations are hypocrites for not criticizing Biden for doing the exact same thing. Which, of course, raises the question, is there a meaningful difference between Biden's policy and Trump's policy with regards to this? And, of course, there is a very substantial difference. So the reason that Trump's policy, his border, holding kids at the border policy was controversial wasn't because it wasn't necessarily because it ended up with children being held at the border. The reason why Trump's policy was so fucked up and so uniquely bad was because Trump mandated that parents weren't allowed in the country and had to be held at the border, and mandated that children and parents couldn't be held together, so children were being separated from their parents at the border. And B, the places where these children were put, and as a result of that, we had thousands more children being held at the border than would be necessary if we were to only take in and hold kids at the border who came in unaccompanied by an adult, which is what Biden is doing. And two, the places where these kids were put were literally behind chain-linked fences in massive groups at border patrol facilities. Whereas this new facility that Biden's opening up is, say what you want, it's not that. It's nowhere near that. So this isn't to say that you can't be criticizing Joe Biden's policy, right? However, this is to say that the context and the conditions of what Biden is doing is vastly different to the context and the conditions of what Trump was doing. I think the justification that's given for why we can't just send out kids to the into the country, why we have to hold kids at the border in some capacity, is that, well, A, there's a virus, we don't want to just throw kids out on the street during a virus. B, we generally require that in order for some kids come in to reunite with family members who are in the US. Some don't, however. And if we just give away kids, we need kids to be accompanied by an adult before setting them free. But the problem is, if we just give them out to anybody, this could lead to a lot of problems. This could lead to a lot of problems. This could lead to things like child sex trafficking, people taking advantage of this policy. So that's the general justification for why we shouldn't just be letting any kids. We can't just not hold kids at the border if they come unaccompanied, at least for some period of time. We could debate. I haven't thought about that. I'm sure there's alternative policies that are better than Biden's. But there was absolutely no justification whatsoever for what Trump was doing with regards to family separations and holding kids in literal cages where they were forced to drink toilet water. So yeah, you can say it's still bad, right? You can say Biden's policy is bad. I'm very much open to hearing that argument, right? I'm sure there are better alternatives. But to say that it is equivalent or even near equivalent to what people were criticizing Trump for is patently untrue. It is it is misinformation. So when the serfs post things like the tweet that they posted, when Hassan makes the video that he made, they are spreading misinformation, and it is very irresponsible. So the reason that I want to talk about this is because, listen, okay, I don't like Biden. I'm not a Biden simp, right? I am a socialist. I dislike Biden. I think my honest assessment of Biden is that he's more or less a weather vane for where the Democratic Party is at any point in time. If the Democratic Party moves right, he's going to move right slightly. If the Democratic Party moves left, he's going to move left slightly. I think Biden is someone who generally positions himself in the exact center of wherever the Democratic Party is at any given point in time. I obviously don't like that because I am concerned with pushing Biden as left as possible, or pushing the Democratic Party as left as possible. So I'm not a Biden fan, right? I'm totally into the idea of criticizing Biden from the left. My problem, however, is that if we are going to be credible as a movement, the criticisms that we levy have to have merit to them. If we are continually levying criticisms that don't have any merit and are easily verifiably false, it hurts our image, it hurts our credibility as a movement. In addition, I think that in America, certainly, we are facing a massive problem where there seems to be a widening chasm between how people on different sides of the political spectrum perceive reality. Right-wingers have their own version of reality where, the election was rigged against Trump and there's a deep state and Hugo Chavez created the machines that were used in 2020 to count votes or whatever. And I am deeply concerned about lefties also engaging in spreading this kind of misinformation. I think any action which unnecessarily widens this chasm that we should all be concerned about, I think is an immoral and unjustifiable action. That's in general why I think it's not good to be spreading misinformation like this. And it's also not hard, right? Because if the serfs or if Hassan were to actually read the article rather than just read the headline and then post it for Twitter likes, they would have a much more nuanced understanding of what's going on here. It's not that hard. Just read the article of the headline that you're citing. Yeah, and that's what's so frustrating for me about all of this, is that if you're being paid to be a political commentator who informs people's understanding of reality, you could at least put in, a little bit of work understanding that, making sure that the understanding of reality that you're transmitting is a valid one or a coherent one. So yeah, that's sort of my problem with all of that. Because they scared off suburbanites. Anyways. Okay. What's something else we could talk about? Why do you think lefties are so obsessed to the idea of reading past, or so opposed to the idea of reading past a headline? Because it's easier to just post out of context sensationalist headlines for Twitter brownie points than it is to actually put the legwork into making sure you're properly informing the millions of people who watch you. I would say that's the reason. The headlines have to be as clickbaity. as they can be for ethical reasons. Yeah, of course. Okay. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick. Oh, wait, should we go over the Glenn Greenwald thing? Did you guys hear about this? This shit was crazy to me. Okay. So, fuck, trying to find it. Yeah, okay, here's the thread. Do you guys know who Glenn Greenwald is? Are we all familiar with Glenn Greenwald here? So, Glenn Greenwald is a dumbass and a grifter who I stepped down from his place as a writer for The Intercept, which I believe he co-founded, in order to, I guess because his editors were telling them that they were trying to edit a piece of his where he was spreading misinformation and baseless claims about the Hunter Biden scandal. So that's who Glenn Greenwald is. Glenn Greenwald's a guy who goes on Tucker Carlson's show all the time to get right-wing populist brownie points. Glenn Greenwald is a guy who pushed the GME stuff, possibly caused millions of people to lose massive amounts of money by encouraging them to own the big hedge funds by investing in GME, which in actuality ended up being a net financial benefit for those hedge funds, and caused millions of working people to lose a fuck ton of money. I don't know about millions, actually. I don't know why I said that. But nonetheless, ended up being a massive benefit overall to rich Wall Street people and ended up being a negative to your average working person. And Glenn Greenwald encouraged people to do this as some sort of a populist revolution because he's a stupid fuck. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Glenn Greenwald is somebody who, I'm trying to think. What else has Glenn Greenwald done? Whatever. That's all irrelevant here. But, oh yeah, I think he more or less was sympathetic to the Capitol riots or something. Yeah, Glenn Greenwald is just one of these populist left pieces of shit. Absolutely brain dead and a grifter, 100%. But anyways, he posted this thread today where I guess he just comes out as an unironic TERF. He says, some really fascinating findings in this big new Gallup survey on Americans identifying as LGBT. It should lead to lots of deeper investigation to understand what explains some of these astronomical changes, but for now, a few points to note. There's been a huge explosion in the number of Americans identifying as LGBT. Close to 1 out of every 5 Gen X or Gen Z so identifies, 17%. That's more than a 4-fold increase from Gen X, 4%. But almost all of the increase comes from those identifying as bi or trans, not gay or lesbian. Hold on. Let's see if that's even true. Bisexual went from 5.1 to 11.5%, so that seems more or less true. There has been a big boom in bisexuals. Gay hasn't gone up that much. Lesbian went up by about 0.6%. And transgender also went up by about 0.6%. So I guess right off the bat, Glenn Greenwald is just can't read because very clearly the number of lesbians or the percentage of lesbians has gone up to the same extent that trans people has. So the opening premise that it's all driven by trans people and bisexual people, no lesbians or gay people, is wrong. Just dude, the numbers are right there. You screenshotted them and posted them. I don't get what the confusion is. Of Americans now claiming bi identity, the vast majority of them are in long-term relationships, are in opposite sex relationships. Oh, I read that wrong, sorry. Rather than same-sex ones, 3.7%. So times more people who identify as bi live in hetero-appearing relationships than gay/lesbian ones. Finally, is famed lesbian... Okay, so I don't know what he's implying here. Maybe that these people aren't actually bi because they're not actually in bisexual relationships. The reason why most bisexual people might be in straight-appearing relationships isn't because they're faking being bi, but because it's a lot more easy, like in terms of social acceptability, to be in a straight relationship than a gay relationship if you're, like an average person. I don't think this is, like, these numbers make the point that he's trying to imply here. It's more socially acceptable. There's generally more, as like a bisexual man, there's generally going to be more straight women available to you to date than there is like gay men, because obviously sexual minorities are minorities, like there's less of them. So it's harder to be in that kind of relationship if you're a bisexual person. So that implication is really weird. Finally, his famed lesbian... Okay, I really like this part. He makes sure to point out that she's a lesbian because she's a transphobe and she's a TERF. But if he notes that she's a lesbian, well, you can't call her bigoted. She's a lesbian, right? Like, if you belong to one minority group, surely you can't be bigoted against another minority group. How could this be? Finally, as famed lesbian Kitty Herzog notes... Kitty Herzog is her real name. There are now, among millennials and Gen Z, more people identifying as trans than lesbian. She has previously argued that masculine girls are now encouraged to identify as trans, causing a decrease in the lesbian population. Here's Katie's article exploring whether the disappearance of lesbian culture is due to the encouragement which masculine girls receive from the society, therapists, healthcare workers, etc., to identify as trans, not as lesbian women. Clearly, the massive increase in Americans self-identifying as LGBT, an increase due overwhelmingly to more bi and trans self-identifiers, is partially a function of increased societal acceptance. But that's clearly not the only factor, and I doubt it's the primary one. Very strong claim here. And what evidence is there to support this claim? Well, a lesbian one time argued that lesbian women are being encouraged to be trans. I read this article before streaming. What evidence, what studies does Katie cite to suggest that this is a real phenomena, that lesbian girls are being encouraged to be trans? None, right? She doesn't cite any evidence for this claim. There's no empirical backing. This is just a broad thesis with no intuitive reason to believe and no empirical evidence supporting it. And Glenn Greenwald is just platforming this because, well, a lesbian argued it once. Additionally, in this article, she makes the claim that lesbians as a category are going extinct because of the rise of trans people. However, if you look at Glenn's own data, lesbians have increased as much as trans people have. So, the argument made in this article could not be explained by this data. Because if the arguments made in this article were correct, then the number of lesbians would be going down while the number of trans people would be going up. But the number of lesbians are also going up. So this data doesn't even support the thesis of that article. This is such a strange hill to die on. And additionally, I just want to say, kind of more or less what she was getting at here was social contagion theory, basically that, being trans is like a social contagion or whatever. She doesn't cite any studies. This is a theory which ought to be empirically tested. She doesn't cite any studies supporting this. The only study that I'm aware of that has ever claimed to verify this claim was the rapid onset gender dysphoria study. However, obviously, that study was literally retracted, and the lady who did the study lost her job because there was such glaring methodological impediments. The people who were interviewed in that study were the parents of trans kids rather than trans kids themselves, and the parents were selected from obviously biased transphobic websites. So there was like convenience sampling and obviously biased convenience sampling. And even the author said that this wasn't like an overall prevalent study that you could use to make generalized claims like the kind that Katie is making here. So yeah, basically, Glenn Greenwald. Oh, also, I would bet, okay, and again, don't take my word for this, right? Like, there would need to be like some empirical evidence on this. My understanding, my guess here, the reason that people who are bi are raising the number of bi people is raising way more than like gay and lesbian people, is because if you're bi, in past generations where like being gay is more stigmatized, it's a lot easier to like be bi and hide that you're attracted to men, assuming you're a man, and hide that you're attracted to men and just like pretend like you're straight than it would be to do that if you were gay, right? Because you're still attracted to women, so you can just like, be attracted to the gender that you are still attracted to and then not tell anyone that you're attracted to men. If you're gay, you can't really do that. So it would sort of make sense that like an increased LGBT acceptance would lead to a higher level of like bisexual people coming out than gay people. I also think that there's probably just more, like, I think bisexuality, barring any social stigma, is probably going to be more common than homosexuality. I've long held the belief that most people are probably bi to some extent. But that's just me, okay? Listen, this is my armchair psychologizing now instead of Glenn's. Don't take anything I say at like face value. I haven't done a study on this. But basically the point here is that Glenn's arguments contradict themselves. There's no empirical evidence supporting anything he's saying. And he's basically spreading transphobic turf arguments to spread fear-mongering about trans people without any basis in empirical evidence for any of the claims that he's making. Yeah, and that's because Glenn Greenwald is a piece of shit. He's a right-wing, or no, he's not right-wing, but he panders to the right wing because he's a grifter, the same way Tulsi Gabbard does, same way any of these people do. Yeah. I guess that's the major point I'm trying to get at here. Essentially, Glenn Greenwald's brain seems to have been poisoned by consuming too much of Tucker Carlson's semen, is, I guess, the point here. What are we saying true to? Oh, is this my bi take? Increase from trans people proportionally to the original. Yeah. But remember that man being attracted to twinkie men doesn't make them bi. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. Okay. So, with Glenn Greenwald out of the way, there's one more thing to talk about before I guess I just talk to chat for a little while. Or maybe not, chat's being inactive today. Might just... Marco Rubio. Okay. Let's see. Let's find this Marco tweet. What? Okay. Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about child benefits. Okay, what's the Discord? Someone post the Discord link in chat. Okay, We're going to talk about child benefits now. So, I've long said that the great contradiction in among modern American conservatism is that American conservatives will, on the one hand, claim to be pro-family, and they will, on the other hand, claim to be pro-free market. But you can't be both of those things. These are mutually exclusive positions, right? Because the core mechanisms of the free market and the way that the free market distributes resources is fundamentally antithetical to anyone who has an interest in propping up families. In America, we spend less than almost like any European, Scandinavian country on child benefits. And as a result, we have the highest level of child poverty. This is because the reason that I say market distribution is fundamentally antithetical to the family is for two major reasons, right? The first reason is that if you have a child, you are always going to be financially worse off in a capitalist free market system than if you don't have a child. This is because a child is a massive drain on your resources. A child doesn't add to the factor productivity of your family. And since capitalism only distributes resources based on factor productivity, having a child is always going to be a massive net loss to your finances. The other problem is that peak childbearing years, so around like mid to late 20s, when most people are having children, occurs when most people are going to be making the least money that they'll make throughout their lifetimes. Because most people are having children in their mid to late 20s, and in your mid to late 20s, you're generally going to be having like an entry-level job. You likely haven't gotten many promotions yet, etc. And for these two reasons, right, this has sort of two outcomes, right? A lot of people who want to have families don't have families because they're afraid of the financial ruin which will happen to them if they choose to start a family. And B, people who do go through with having families are completely financially fucked as a result of them having families. I saw a crazy statistic. This is in the Matt Brunig paper that I'm kind of referencing here. It's called the Family Fun Pack. I would recommend you go check it out. The statistic is that if there were no children, not only would there not be any child poverty, but poverty among adults would be half what it is currently if there were no children. So if we care about families, if we don't want massive swaths of people living in poverty, if we don't want people not being able to have families because they're afraid of what it'll do to their finances, then we have to find some way to have some sort of welfare program that distributes money to people who have children, extra money. And the question, of course, that's being debated among some Republicans and a lot of Democrats is, how do we do that? What form should these child benefits take? The way that we currently dole it out is by a few different tax credits. We have the earned income tax credit, we have the additional child tax credit, and we have I'm blanking on it. I can't remember the other tax credit. The child tax credit, sorry. I don't know how I remember the additional child tax credit, but not the child tax credit. But anyways, however, some Republican a lot of people on the left, some on the right, Mitt Romney included, want to scrap these sort of tax credit program that we have going on and replace it with just a flat check that we send out to people monthly who have children. Marco Rubio has a counter-argument, and this is just the general sort of neocon right-wing counter-argument that we'll have to this proposal, that you'll hear to this proposal. Sending $250/$350 per month per child to everyone with no work requirement is welfare. Being pro-family means being pro-work. our expanded child tax credit idea is a far better approach. So what I want to do here is first explain why Marco Rubio's argument is wrong, in the sense that tax credits are good and that they increase labor force participation, and then explain why the sending like $350 per month per child to everyone is a superior policy than the tax credit system that we currently have in place. So in terms of how the reason that Marco Rubio fundamentally believes that a tax credit will incentivize work is because our current tax credit system is fundamentally trapezoidal, meaning it phases in with income, meaning in order to receive the benefit, you have to work. The question is, do these kinds of policies actually increase work empirically? The first response that I want to give is that just from a logical perspective, I don't see why this would be the case. Why would having an earned income tax credit increase labor force participation? Because in order for the mechanisms of the earned income tax credit to incentivize people to go find work so that they can receive the benefits of the earned income tax credit, this would require that your average working American, your average poor American who already has a fuck ton on their plate, has some in-depth, nuanced understanding of policy and the mechanisms of tax credit policy, which obviously is not really the case, right? How can people be incentivized to do something by a policy that they don't even like understand that how it works, right? This isn't to say that like working people are stupid or anything like that. I'm just saying like it happens to be a reality. Your average poor working person in America is very busy. They don't have time. Generally speaking, most people aren't spending their nights like I am, like reading about policy design, right? And then empirically, we can see that what I'm saying is borne out. Here's a neat study. This is called Taxation and Labor Force Participation, the EITC Reconsidered, Earned Income Tax Credit. And what this author kind of does is looks at a bunch of different expansions of the Earned Income Tax Credit and sees how they affect labor force participation rates. This blue line is labor force participation of single women with children. The black line is without children. Now, single women with children are the sort of prime demographic that the EITC is funded to go towards. So if the Earned Income Tax Credit incentivized labor market participation, we would see that the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit would lead to a narrowing of this blue line and this black line, a narrowing of the gap between these two lines. However, as the author tracks, there was about 5 expansions of the Earned Income Tax Credit between 1968 and 2018. Most of these, about 4 of these, well, literally 4 of these expansions of the Earned Income Tax Credit had no discernible effect on the trajectory of the blue line. Because this is the fundamental argument that people make, is that in 93, when we expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit, we saw the blue line do this. However, if you look at other expansions of the Earned Income Tax Credit, this blip, this 93 expansion, seems to be an outlier in terms of its effect on labor force participation. Another thing that the authors did in this paper was they looked at, from 1984 to 2018, they looked at 8 state-level EITC supplements. And they essentially found that none of these, similar to these 4 EITC expansions, none of these expansions actually led to an increase in labor force participation. So this one example of this, it leading to this, seems like an outlier. The author of the study also examined an expansion of the WTC, which is essentially the equivalent of the EITC, but in the UK. In 1999, there was a massive expansion of the WTC, and the author studied whether this had an impact on the labor force participation rate, and of course, it didn't. So why did this one one expansion lead to a labor force participation? Because it seems like this is such an outlier that we can generally say that this is probably just a coincidence, right? And the author of the study even vindicated that specific claim, right? So the author of the study looked at the 1993 expansion that did lead to this effect in particular, and basically found that after you control for unemployment, like state-level unemployment and welfare waivers that were happening at the same time, the impact of the earned income tax credit on the labor force participation rate completely disappears. So essentially, according to this study, according to all of this data, the earned income tax credit and expansions of the earned income tax credit do not, to any extent, increase the labor force participation rate, as Marco Rubio is saying. Now that we have that meme sort of out of the way, why is it the case that the earned income tax credit and doling out child benefits via tax credit is bad, and why checks are good? Well, there's sort of 5 fundamental reasons, I would say, that tax credits are a bad mechanism through which we can do this. For one, tax credits are paid out annually, meaning that it's hard for families to incorporate this payment into a monthly budget. 2, because there's a phase-in and a phase-out rate, the earned income tax credit is something which is means-tested, meaning that in order to show that you are eligible for receiving it, this requires like a lot of paperwork. A lot of people don't want to engage in that paperwork in order to receive the benefit, and therefore only 78% of people who are eligible for the earned income tax credit actually receive the benefit of the earned income tax credit. So that's like 22% of people aren't even receiving the benefit because it's so poorly designed and requires so much paperwork to receive. Thirdly, as we've noted previously, the earned income tax credit and these tax credits are fundamentally trapezoidal, meaning they phase in with income, meaning they leave out the poorest children. Like the poorest children in society don't receive any benefits from these child tax credits. Additionally, these tax credits are targeted to last year's income, not even this year's income. So based on how rich you were last year is how much of this benefit you're going to be receiving, which obviously is a poor way of doing it, right? Like if you were, maybe somewhat middle class last year, you lost a job, you're doing very poorly this year, you're kind of out of luck under a tax credit system. And finally, tax credits involve a very high degree of overhead cost. I believe when you take into account tax preparation fees, overhead costs for these tax credits are like, or the earned income tax credit specifically is like 11%, right? Which is one of the highest overhead costs of any welfare program in the country, right? So the solution, the obvious solution, is to do what Marco Rubio is saying we shouldn't do, and simply send out a flat check, something like $350 per month per child to every family, regardless of their current income. The lack of a phase-in means that children are, the poorest children aren't being left out. The lack of a phase-out means that we don't have exorbitant amounts of paperwork that you have to fill out in order to receive the benefit, meaning everybody gets to receive the benefit, rather than just the 80 or so % of people who actually decide to put in the work to receive it. It's paid out monthly. You can incorporate it into a monthly budget. The overhead cost is going to be a lot lower. In general, this sort of the universal, flat check monthly is in every way a morally and practically superior policy to an expansion of tax credits. So yeah, that's sort of the point here. Meme Guider, you said you're going through Twitter drama. What Twitter drama are you going through? New working paper out today, Minimum Wage Effects in Low Wage Areas with Michael Reich. A proposal to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 by 2024 would increase the relative minimum wage, the ratio to the national median wage, national median wage to about 0.68. In Alabama and Mississippi, our two lowest wage states, the relative minimum wage would rise to 0.77 and 0.85 respectively. Yet research on state-level minimum wage policies does not extend beyond $10. The highest studied state-level relative minimum wage is 0.59. To this close gap, we study minimum wage effects in counties and PUMAs where relative minimum wage ratios already reach as high as 0.82. Using ACS data since 2005 and 51 events, we sort counties and PUMAs according to their relative minimum wages and bytes. We report average results for all the events in our sample and separately for those with higher and lower impacts. We find positive wage effects but do not detect adverse effects on employment, weekly hours, or annual weeks worked. We do not find negative employment effects among women, blacks, and or Hispanics. We do find substantial declines in household and child poverty. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Because the data that I'll have to read this later. I think I'm reading this correctly. But the data that I was familiar with suggested that you can raise the national minimum wage to about 60% of the national median wage with pretty safely without seeing like substantial negative employment effects. But that's like the national rate. And there are some places like rural communities where the average wage and the average like cost of living is so much lower than the national average that people theorize, well, if you raise it to 15 in these places, then these specific places will see substantial negative effects because the median wage is so much lower. That $15 would be substantially above 60% of that. However, if this paper is correct, I'll have to read it later, then we have evidence that even significantly above 60% in these specific communities, likely because they have higher rates of monopsony, the minimum wage is still a pretty safe bet in terms of employment impacts, and still net declines household and child poverty. So that's pretty cool. The evidence just keeps stacking up that the $15 minimum wage is just a good idea. Stupid drama in the Radlib group chat. Okay. Mouthy, the argument is that in these low-wage states, monopsony is higher. Yeah, that's what I said, right? Did I say something else? I thought that's what I said. Cashel is losing his marbles. I don't know who that is. What do you think of MMT? I have like vaguely negative feelings about MMT, but I haven't read enough about it. I love when conservatives are like my Econ 101 when they argue against raising the minimum wage, but you literally learn about monopsony in Econ 101, lol. Yeah, exactly. I mean, keep in mind, though, that this place is where it's already the case. I feel like that's a meaningful difference. I'm not sure what you mean. MMT, more like cringe. True. Thoughts on the ECP, Mouthy? I think the ECP is largely not a good argument. There seems to be three components of the ECP to me. The first is like the local knowledge problem. The second is like the lack of a cost metric. The third is the sheer number of calculations required in order to plan the economy. In terms of like the argument from like the sheer number of calculations required to plan an economy being too many calculations, this doesn't seem to really bear out in the sense that like massive firms like Walmart or Amazon likely would have already hit this level if this argument were true, or would have already hit this wall if this argument were true. The cost metric thing, Mises himself argued that the cost metric, like labor time could be like the universal cost metric required in order to plan the economy. He had like some arguments like it necessarily leads to the undervaluation of natural resources and stuff like that. Um, I've addressed the arguments that he makes there in a Patreon essay. If you want to go read that, it's too like complicated to get into here. Um, yeah, I generally think that the ECP doesn't really seem super credible. Walmart literally has nothing to do with the ECP. You don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. begging libertarians to read the People's Republic of Walmart before criticizing it online. We're going to have some regrets. You okay, bud? Oh, living in Texas. Can't imagine living in Texas. Okay, so Mouthy, basically my point is that the ratio in these counties is already high. Well, that would be different from raising the ratio to a high level. Well, like, I mean, I'm not sure like what you're. Yeah, it is hard to explain. I'm not sure what you're getting at. Like, the argument is that yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at. Because if this like this is counting wage raises, right, to levels that are a larger percentage of the median wage. That was like my interpretation. I haven't read the study yet. I'll have to read it later. Do you still believe in the LTV? I'm like agnostic about it. It seems to me that like the I've talked about this before. Like the LTV, I was originally convinced by a lot of the Shike and Cockshot data. Aiden, according to Aiden, there was a pretty good response to Cockshot and Kleeman or Cockshot and Cottrell and Shike by Kleeman, who sort of uh, critiques the cross-sectional data, the cross-sectional empirical evidence for the LTV. I know that Cockshot has done like a bunch of responses to Kleeman, so I'll have to read that whole exchange before like deciding whether I think the LTV is empirically valid. However, Aiden is socialism on left. However, oh fuck, I'm trying to think of what I was getting at. Yeah. Oh, right. I don't know how relevant it is. Like I feel like any prescriptive claim that I could make, any prescriptive economic claim that I could make using the LTV, I could make without using the LTV. So I don't know like whether it's even worth the time. Hold on, I'm letting my dog in real quick. Come here, bud. Get out of my room, you fool. Oh, now it's my dog. Come here, bud. Come here. I don't know what he wants. Oh. True, it is a dog. I thought people were saying DGG for a second. Can you guys see him? Can I name my dog Destiny? That's a good idea. Oh, yeah, I can link the paper. Fuck, how do I link it? Oh. You can't link things? Why not? You're a mod now. You should be able to link. Curious about your thoughts on Angry Hawkswell? I don't really know much about him, to be honest. Let's go, Drew. What's your response to people say you can't have immigration and welfare state? I don't know why having a larger economy, a larger labor force, more economic productivity, and more tax revenue would be antithetical to having a bigger welfare state. It seems like the opposite would be the case. Hey, Kyle Saltzman. Did you draw your profile picture? No. Someone else made it. Right, wasn't Friedman who started that argument? I have no clue. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Milton Friedman said a lot of stupid shit. The problem is, like, Milton Friedman was smart and he was a good economist, but Milton Friedman's whole thing was that he was like a really good monetary economist. Like he was really good at like monetary like theory. And that's what he wanted Nobel Prize for, right? But but like his other takes on like welfare policy, right? Like that was not his area of expertise. That is not why he won a Nobel Prize, and those are the takes that people constantly cling to. Do you believe in removing pedophiles from society? No. Not like deontologically, right? Like I think that would be like that would involve like a really dangerous precedent. I feel like that would, in terms of like the precedent that would set, what would be required to do that, like as a policy, I think we would get into a lot of really bad territory. I think there are alternative ways, and I think that I'm open to the argument that the best way to like stop people from I don't know. I would need to look into like I'm sure there's like a good like psychological and sociological like evidence on like what are the best ways to like prevent pedophiles from like molesting children, and I think a lot of the emotion and like charged nature of the topic prevents a lot of us from like genuinely exploring that. But yeah. What are you currently reading apart from like policy analysis, like fiction maybe? Nothing. All I read is like political shit. I might read what's his name? Hans of Hakir Harkir. I don't know how to pronounce it. Hans recommended that I read like Rise of Kyoshi. It's part of like the Avatar series. I might read that because I liked Avatar. Does the no? I don't think no, no. I'm not in favor of the death penalty in any case. Funnily enough, Rem made a great video. Yeah, I think he did. Yeah. Friedman's most famous quote was literally "Free lunch isn't free, duh." Wasn't there like a Milton Friedman quote where he's like, "If you gave the government a desert, they would lose all the sand." Like, okay, dude. Thoughts on Republican socialism and Chairman Alex Geo? I don't know. I'm not too familiar with either of those things, so I couldn't really say. Jason Prince tweeting, quote tweeting Hassan, now saying dumb shit. Who's that? I think the nuance and deep understanding is mostly just boring Democrat apologia at this point. This is dumb. I'm not saying that Hassan is going to have a genius take on this. He's an entertainer, not a philosopher. At the same time, people who are making excuses for Biden saying it's hard when he opens up a new kids and cage facility are the same people who called Trump a traitor for doing it. That's not the argument. Nobody's saying like Biden has to do it because he's hard. People are just saying, or because it's hard, because it's hard. People are just saying that like it's a fundamentally different circumstance. These are not the same thing. Like putting kids in cages because kids are showing up unaccompanied at the border and you don't want to just turn them loose into the country or give them to some random stranger or like turn them loose in the middle of a pandemic, that is fundamentally not the same thing as mandating that parents aren't let into the country and that parents and children are separated at the border and that children are put in literal like fenced in cages in massive numbers. Like these are fundamentally different things. Did paper did Friedman ever publish any actual studies? Yes, I think he did. I think um, one of Friedman's best things that I know of him for was he made a really good critique of like Austrian business cycle theory, that fundamentally had to do with like whether or not the size of a boom predicts the size of an economic bust. I thought that was like really interesting. Mouthy, you claim to like electoralism, yet you haven't elected socialism. So true. So true. Curious. I don't think I could ever run for office. Like people would just pull up like old clips of fucking mouthy tanky Fidel. I was never tanky, but I was like a much more like hardcore like revolutionary communist. Also, running for office sounds like fucking super. I don't think I can. mentally handle that level of stress. And I don't even think that I don't even think that it would, like, the job would be that fun for me. I don't think I would enjoy that. Have you spoken about third party? Is it worth it or a waste of time and resources? If like socialists, I don't think so. I mean, like I'm empathetic to the idea that like if socialists build enough power for themselves within like the Democratic Party, that it might be beneficial to like start a third party. But it just like it's like if you've already built up that much power in the Democratic Party and you socialists control the Democratic Party, then why not just use the Democratic Party? Are you going to be debunking an old month video or not? Not today. Would you be an advisor? Yeah. I would love to work at like a think tank or something. It's like that's the dream, you know. Well, I split the liberal vote. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We have such a good opportunity with like if Trump were to start his own like new Patriot Party or whatever. Um, like that'd be such a good opportunity to just like split the right wing vote and like have the left win. That like if socialists were like, okay, we're creating a third party now, like that'd be a huge wasted opportunity, I think. Yeah, of course, yeah. What misinterpreting equating? No fucking way. Oh, he said it's not exactly. Oh, I think you said meme guider. He said it's not exactly what Trump is doing. Yeah, you read it wrong. Okay. Wait, but I wasn't saying that you were spreading this information, right? I was saying that you were objecting to people objecting to spreading this sort of misinformation. Because when Hassan says, what happened to No Kids in Cages, he's equating what Biden is doing with what Trump is doing, when these things are massively qualitatively different. And so when you say that to try and nuance this issue um, is to like be democratic apologia, and it's not a legitimate thing to do to like point out that what Biden is doing and what Trump are doing are different things. Like that is essentially saying why are why are you objecting to misinformation? Like that's my point. I guess I did say one with the libs just let me spread misinformation, but I'm not trying to say that you're the one spreading disinformation. I'm saying that objecting to people objecting to spreading disinformation on this issue is kind of cringe. Rocking my bad, yeah. I think the icon got messed, so I'm just gonna type it in Discord for you, Mike Duke. I went wrong, my bad. Misinformation in the center left. Okay. I'm probably gonna hop off now. Thanks for hanging out. I might stream again soon. Like tomorrow or something, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Um Join my Patreon. I'm writing a article where I'm sort of going over all the sources and arguments that I'd compiled to use in my debate with Sargon of Akkad that never happened about trans issues. I'm working on like a bunch of different articles right now. So if you want to read shit that I write, join my Patreon. Also, for $10, I'll say your name at the end of my videos. Anyways, yeah. Good night, everybody. Meme Guider, have fun as a mod in my chat now. With great power comes great responsibility.